April 1761. The Bay of Pigs.
Y tú, campesino, y tú.
In the years since he took power, Fidel Castro has become an enemy of the United States. In the eyes of Washington, a threat to United States security in the Caribbean. A plan of action against him is drawn up. March 17, 1960. CIA Chief Allen Dulles is told secretly, organize a Cuban exile force. He is not told how the force is to be used. He is only told, get it ready. In Miami, recruiting for an exile army has begun. The operation is supposed to be secret, but word of what is happening quickly leaks out. Six weeks after the secret meeting at the White House, Fidel Castro has publicly charged that the United States is training an army to invade Cuba. Meanwhile, in Miami, there are 50 exile groups of every political hue, from former supporters of Batista to former supporters of Castro. They have only one thing in common. They want to overthrow Fidel. The CIA's problem is to find a way to unify them.
Porque siempre los pueblos son los que han derrotado a la tiranía que padece.
The people of Cuba will overthrow Castro because always the people are the ones who overthrow dictatorship.
The announcement of the formation of the Frente does not receive the expected attention. The summer of 1960 is a bad time for the United States. Other events occupy the headlines. A U-2 shot down over the Soviet Union. Nikita Khrushchev in Paris insulting the President of the United States, wrecking the summit conference. It is at this moment that the Soviet tanker Pekin slips quietly into Havana Harbor, carrying a cargo of crude oil that will set off a chain reaction. Castro orders Texaco, Shell, and Esso plants in Cuba to refine the Soviet oil. They refuse, and Castro seizes the refineries. He offers no reparations. Over angry Cuban protests, the United States retaliates by cutting off its imports of Cuban sugar. Castro seizes more United States property. Now, in the summer of 1960, the United States and Cuba have reached the point of no return. In Washington, the Eisenhower administration is now convinced it is in the United States' national interest to get rid of Fidel Castro. At this moment in Guatemala, a Cuban exile army is being created by the CIA. A Cuban exile air force with B-26 bombers. They are the instruments with which the CIA plans to overthrow Fidel Castro. Havana, summer 1960. Fidel Castro admits publicly for the first time there is unrest inside Cuba, counter-revolutionary activity. Among his opponents now is his former Minister of Public Works, Manuel Rai, leader of the MRP.
The MRP was highly organized and well extended over the whole country. Our organization reached almost every section of the Cuban life: civic institutions, professional organizations, labor unions, the militia, the army, and we have people inside of Fidel Castro's office.
The MRP operates in the cities. It's an underground movement specializing in sabotage. In the Escambray Mountains is another anti-Castro force, the guerrillas. In September 1960, it has become a serious threat to Fidel Castro. He comes to the Escambray to take personal command of the military operation. But resistance continues. Late in September, Castro leaves the Escambray and comes to New York. He is an uninvited guest. He will attend the UN General Assembly. While he is in New York, he sees his new ally, Nikita Khrushchev. The date is September 26, 1960. Castro will tell the General Assembly the United States is seeking to overthrow him, is training an army to invade his country, is interfering in Cuba's internal affairs.
El problema de Cuba.
A few weeks later, the Democratic candidate for president is in New York campaigning. He issues a statement in which he says the United States is not doing enough for the Cuban exiles. He says the United States ought to help them. In their television debate, Vice President Nixon disagrees.
Now, I don't know what Senator Kennedy suggests when he says that we should help those who oppose the Castro regime, both in Cuba and without. But I do know this, that if we were to follow that recommendation, that we would lose all of our friends in Latin America, we would probably be condemned in the United Nations, and we would not accomplish our objective. I know something else. It would be an open invitation for Mr. Khrushchev to come in.
As the votes are counted on November 8th, it is clear that a key issue has been who knows best how to handle Castro. It is the closest presidential election in United States history.
But we finally emerged successfully. Now, as far as the next program, I went to the country with very clear views of what the United States ought to do in the 60s. I have been elected, and therefore I'm going to do my best to implement those views.
Even as the president-elect speaks, in Guatemala, the force that he has called for in his campaign, the force that Nixon has denied exists, that Eisenhower has created, that Castro has denounced, is getting trained and ready. In Cuba, meanwhile, Castro is sending his best troops into the Escambray to destroy the guerrillas, now cut off from arms and supplies.
Nos hicieron una ofensiva.
Thousands of Fidel's militiamen began an offensive against us. They moved out the farmers, killed the cows, pigs, and chickens, cut down the fruit trees, burned the houses, took away the food. In view of this and the lack of help, we had to flee the island.
The revolt is crushed. Castro has eliminated one threat to his survival. As 1960 ends, he goes on television to warn the Cuban people about another. He says the United States is preparing to invade Cuba. The invasion will come before Eisenhower leaves office. He calls for a general mobilization. The United States and Cuba break diplomatic relations. Tension mounts. The moment of armed confrontation between Cuba and the United States is near. January 20th, 1961.
So let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity is always subject to proof. Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate.
For a moment, there is a breathing spell in relations between the United States and Cuba. A break in the tension that has been mounting for 6 months. In Havana, the militia is demobilized. The milicianos are sent back to the field. The leaders join them to harvest the crops. But in Washington, Cuba has not been forgotten. In his campaign, the new president has promised to do something about Cuba. Now he must decide what to do. But his advisors are new and inexperienced. He must rely on the professionals. For military advice, on General Lemnitzer and the Joint Chiefs, on the CIA, which is handling the Cuban problem, political and military aspects as well as intelligence.
CIA Director Allen Dulles briefed the president on the Cuban situation. He told the president the details of the invasion plan known by the code name of Operation Pluto. At that point, the landing was to be made at Trinidad on the Cuban coast 100 miles east of the Bay of Pigs. The United States was to supply air cover. As time went on, both of these parts of the plan were to be changed with the approval or at least the acquiescence of the CIA and the Pentagon. But at this point, Dulles simply wanted an okay from the President to continue preparations. He got it.
From this date on, Operation Pluto gets top priority from the CIA. The CIA tells the Cuban exiles they must agree on a single leader if they want United States help. The Cubans choose Dr. Jose Miro Cardona. Once Castro's prime minister, Dr. Miro has remained neutral in the power struggle among the exile leaders. Now he comes to New York to become head of the anti-Castro Cubans. At his press conference, Dr. Miro speaks for the first time as president of the new Revolutionary Council.
Ayuden a Cuba. Please help Cuba. A la verdadera Cuba. The real Cuba. A la verdadera Cuba, que es la Cuba de José Martí.
Now the Cubans are united. The MRP has joined the new coalition reluctantly. They don't like the way the CIA is dominating the operation, but they assume United States participation assures the operation's success. They don't want to be left out of any new Cuban government. And the anti-Castro Cuban leaders feel they have reached a satisfactory understanding with the CIA. At this moment in Washington, the president is under heavy pressure. He is being pressed to okay the invasion plan. A major source of this pressure is CIA reports on what is happening inside Cuba.
We knew that the Cuban pilots were being trained in Czechoslovakia. We knew that they were going to have, very shortly, available under Cuban direction MiGs in large, considerable numbers. And I'm inclined to think, as I said before, that if a move were to be made short of intervention, probably this was the area of time when it had to be made.
Another source of pressure is the Guatemalans. Unrest is growing there. The communists and the army are demanding the removal of the brigade from the camps. The government feels threatened. The president has not yet made up his mind. Go ahead with the invasion or cancel it. On April 4th, a decisive meeting is held. Obviously, nothing official has ever been said about it. But from this perspective, certain facts are now apparent. On April 4th, the CIA urges the president to go ahead with the invasion. The Joint Chiefs agree, if the CIA estimate is correct, if the brigade has control of the air. Only Senate Foreign Relations Chairman Bright speaks out against the invasion, tells the president privately it is immoral, a mistake, it will fail. The decision can no longer be delayed. The president's experts have told him to go ahead. His staff has not argued against them. The decision is now his alone. He makes up his mind early on the morning of April 5th, 1961. Operation Pluto, the invasion of Cuba, is approved. Miami, the first week of April 1961. Invasion fever is rising among the Cuban exiles. Everyone seems to know the invasion is coming soon. Volunteers pour into exile headquarters. The churches are filled. Prayers are said for the men of the brigade. April 10th, in Guatemala, C-46 transports begin to move the 2506 Assault Brigade out of the camp. Destination, Puerto Cabezas, Nicaragua. At this moment, Dr. Miro and the Revolutionary Council are in New York, 2,000 miles away. In their hotel, they don't know what is happening. No one tells them. And behind the scenes, they are still deeply divided over how to defeat Castro. On April 12th, the president holds a press conference.
And, has a decision been reached on how far this country would be willing to go in helping an anti-Castro uprising or invasion in Cuba are concerned?
Well, first I want to say that there will not be under any conditions be an intervention in Cuba by United States Armed Forces. And this government will do everything it possibly can, and I think it can meet its responsibilities to make sure that there are no Americans involved in any actions inside Cuba.
Preparations for the invasion continue. From Texas, a United States U-2 takes off to photograph Castro Airfield. A United States Naval Task Force puts to sea for Caribbean maneuvers scheduled for the next week. United States Marines are at sea in transport to take part in the maneuvers. April 13th, at Puerto Cabezas, Nicaragua, the Exile invasion fleet is loading. Havana, dawn, Saturday, April 15th. B-26 bombers of the Cuban Exile Air Force attack Castro's airfield. The UN, Saturday morning. Cuban Foreign Minister Raul Roa.
I have been instructed by the revolutionary government of Cuba to denounce before this committee the vandalistic aggression carried out today at dawn against the territorial integrity and political independence of Cuba. The responsibility for this act of imperialistic piracy falls squarely on the government of the United States of America.
Dr. Roa has made a number of charges that are without any foundation. I reject them categorically, and I should like to make several points quite clear to the committee. Regarding the two aircraft which landed in Florida today, they were piloted by Cuban Air Force pilots. These pilots and certain other crew members have apparently defected from Castro's tyranny. No United States personnel participated. No United States government airplanes of any kind participated. These two planes, to the best of our knowledge, were Castro's own Air Force planes, and according to the pilots, they took off from Castro's own Air Force field. I have here a picture of one of the planes. It has the markings of the Castro Air Force right on the tail, which everyone can see for himself.
One of the planes is at a Miami airfield. It is identified as a B-26 attached to the Exile Cuban Brigade. Castro's B-26s have no nose guns. The pilot is identified from a newspaper picture as a member of the brigade. The airstrike he took part in was intended to destroy Castro's Air Force. Two more are planned. Castro has been dealt a serious blow, but his entire Air Force has not been destroyed. The crucial fact is 3 jet trainers are untouched.
Official United States propaganda.
The airstrike has humiliated the United States before the world. It has humiliated Adlai Stevenson, who did not know that what he told the UN was not the truth. The United States reacts to the world outcry against the bombing. The other 2 airstrikes are postponed. This decision leaves Castro with 3 undamaged jets. These jets will be a key to the failure of the invasion. Sunday, April 15th. The exile leaders do not know the invasion fleet is already at sea.
Me esperaron en Nueva York en la escalería del avión.
Awaiting me at the steps of the plane that brought me from Miami were 2 people who identified themselves as officials of the American agency. They took me to a private room, and in a short while, the other leaders of the Revolutionary Council arrived. From there, we entered 2 cars and were driven to Philadelphia, where we took an immigration department plane.
We arrived at an unoccupied airport somewhere in Florida. At that moment, we didn't know which airport it was. We was taken to a house and an armed guard was placed around.
For the next 48 hours, the Cuban exile leaders will be kept under guard in Florida, in this house, while 90 miles away, an invasion is being carried out in their name. Dawn, Monday, April 17th, Bay of Pigs, Cuba. The first units of the brigade reached the beach without opposition. Among them is Humberto Diaz Arguelles of the 2nd Battalion, H Company.
This is the way the battle began at Playa Larga. 3 men went forward as an observers to look for militiamen Suddenly, they found two. They said, "Stop." The militiamen answered, "Stop." Then a soldier from the rear yelled, "We are an army of liberation. We came to fight communism." The militiamen answered, "Fatherland of death, long live Fidel Castro," and the shooting began.
You are looking at film shot on the invasion beach by German and Cuban cameramen. In Havana, as the morning goes on, Castro begins to react to the invasion. Those who can be trusted are armed. Castro takes personal command. The roads out of Havana are clogged with troops moving up to the invasion beach. But in the first hours, the brigade pushes inland. Castro has not yet been able to bring up his tanks and heavy guns. The first communique of the brigade, issued by a Madison Avenue Public Relations office, reports satisfactory progress. Over the beach are 12 B-26s providing air cover. Shortly after dawn, they are attacked by the 3 Castro jets that survived Saturday's airstrike. 5 of them are shot down. The brigade's 2 supply ships and its communications ship are sunk. Within a few minutes, the men on the beach have lost their air cover and their supplies. Now, Castro can bring up his tanks without fear of air attack. And he can bring up thousands of his milicianos. By afternoon, Castro is pressing the brigade hard. How are they to survive? Where are they to get help? Some expect it to come from the underground. There is no uprising, there is no sabotage, there is no help from the underground for the brigade. For the next 48 hours, the men on the beach take a terrible pounding. They wait for help. None comes. They say they have been promised air support by their American advisors. Washington says none was ever promised. Only one thing is clear. The brigade is being driven into the sea. Its only hope of survival is United States military intervention. On Tuesday night, there is a reception at the White House to introduce Congress to the new cabinet. Leaders of both parties are there. Next day, the society pages will call it one of the events of the season. The president leaves early, goes to another part of the White House, where he confers into the night with key advisors.
CIA Deputy Director Richard Bissell had come to the president with a desperate last-minute appeal. He knew that the president had said there would be no intervention. But he now said the brigade was doomed unless the United States intervened, at least with air cover from the Navy task force that was standing off the beach. Admiral Burke, speaking for the Pentagon, favored the intervention. Secretary of State Rusk opposed it. The risk, he said, was too great. If we now openly intervene, we would probably endanger our entire Latin American position, and it would be an invitation to Khrushchev to step in. The president said he would make his decision within the next few hours.
At dawn, the president makes his decision. Later, he tells it to the members of the Revolutionary Council, who have been flown from Florida.
President Kennedy was very firm. He repeated 3 times, Americans shooting Cubans, no, no, no. The president was very upset, and he wanted to explain to us why he had allowed the invasion to take place after he had decided against U.S. military support. He told us that on the day of April 13, he sent a message to the project chief watching the brigade get ready to sail for Cuba. He asked this man, whose name was Jack Haskins, if he still felt the brigade could win by fighting alone. President Kennedy showed us a copy of the reply, signed by Haskins. This document informed the president that the brigade could overthrow the Castro regime without U.S. help. The president looked very angry, and he told us he had relied on such advice in making the decision to send the brigade to Cuba.
On the beach at the Bay of Pigs, fighting continues. The brigade has no food, almost no ammunition, no hope of help from within Cuba or from outside. At 3:45 p.m. Wednesday, April 19th, resistance ends. All those who are not killed are taken prisoner. In less than 72 hours, Castro has destroyed the brigade. The American planned, trained, and backed invasion of Cuba is now a total failure. The failure at the Bay of Pigs was not merely the failure of the Cuban exiles. It was a failure of United States policy, which led to a failure of United States power. Clearly, the United States had the naked power to destroy Castro, but it could not ignore world opinion and use this power. It could not risk the repercussions that might follow the slaughter of Cubans and the occupation of Cuba by United States forces, could not risk the possible escalation to nuclear war. One alternative that suggested itself was indirect intervention, carried out secretly under CIA supervision. The CIA solution was a carefully controlled military operation. It ignored, for the most part, the underground inside Cuba, which could not be controlled. Left-wing former Castro supporters, considered politically unreliable, were shut off from participation. No real effort was made to bring about an uprising of the Cuban people. The divided and mercurial Cuban exile leaders were felt to be undependable, and all real control was taken out of their hands. The CIA put its faith in the brigade, small, politically reliable, controlled by United States agents. An attempt was made to use the brigade and the Cubans as an instrument of United States policy. The tactics were reminiscent of the days of United States big stick diplomacy. But Fidel Castro did not collapse at the first sign of opposition, as many Latin American dictators in the past. As a result, the Cuban exile brigade was destroyed on the beach, while the Cuban exile leaders were held in CIA custody, and a United States task force stood by helplessly. This was probably the low point, the worst moment for John F. Kennedy in his 3 years in the White House. As president, he took full responsibility for this failure of United States policy, this misuse of United States power, although the total blame was clearly not his.